I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from my own daughter on what should have been her proudest day. I am 62 years old, and I have spent the last 4 years working 3 jobs to put my daughter through one of the most prestigious universities in the country. I cleaned offices at night, I worked as a bookkeeper during the day, and I sold handmade jewelry on weekends. Every single penny I earned went toward her education, her dorm room, her textbooks, and her future. I sacrificed everything I had because I believed in her dreams. I believed that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from her. I believed I was doing what any mother would do. My husband died 6 years ago. He was a brilliant man, a professor, an inventor, and the love of my life. When he passed, he left behind a patent for a medical device that eventually sold to a major pharmaceutical company. The money came in quietly over the years, and I never told anyone about it. Not my friends, not my neighbors, and certainly not my daughter. I did not want her to grow up thinking money was something to rely on. I wanted her to understand the value of hard work, of sacrifice, of earning what you have. So I kept it hidden. I kept living modestly. I kept working my 3 jobs. And I kept paying her tuition in full, every semester, without ever asking her to take out a single loan. She never asked where the money came from. She never questioned how a woman working as a cleaning lady could afford $50,000 a year in tuition. She simply assumed I was scraping by, maybe taking out loans myself, maybe getting help from relatives. And I let her believe that. I thought it would keep her humble. I thought it would keep her grounded. I thought it would make her appreciate everything she had. I was wrong. 3 weeks before her graduation, I noticed something strange. The invitation never came. Every other parent I knew had received their graduation invitation in the mail weeks earlier. I waited patiently, thinking maybe it got lost or delayed. But when I finally asked her about it, she looked at me with this cold, distant expression and said she forgot to send it. She said it was not a big deal. She said the ceremony was going to be boring anyway. But I knew my daughter. I knew when she was lying. So I pressed her. I asked her directly if she did not want me there. That is when she said it. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Mom, I love you, but I do not want you at my graduation. You are going to embarrass me. You do not fit in with the other parents. They are doctors, lawyers, executives. You are a cleaning lady. People are going to ask questions, and I do not want to explain why my mom looks like she just came from scrubbing floors. Please just stay home. I will send you pictures." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the daughter I had given everything to, and I could not even find the words to respond. She did not apologize. She did not take it back. She just looked at me like I was an inconvenience, like I was something she needed to hide. Then she grabbed her purse and left. She did not come home that night. She did not call. She did not text. She just disappeared, and I was left alone with the weight of her words crushing me. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold hours ago, and I replayed every moment of her childhood in my mind. I remembered rocking her to sleep when she was a baby. I remembered her first day of school, holding my hand so tight because she was scared. I remembered helping her with her homework every night, even when I was exhausted from work. I remembered every birthday, every holiday, every moment I showed up for her. And now, she did not want me at the most important day of her life because I was not good enough. Because I was not wealthy enough. Because I was not impressive enough. But as the sun started to rise, something shifted inside me. The sadness turned into something else. Anger. Determination. Clarity. I realized that I had spent years hiding the truth from her, thinking I was teaching her a lesson, but all I did was let her believe a lie. I let her believe I was weak. I let her believe I was powerless. I let her believe I was someone to be ashamed of. And that was my fault. So I decided right then and there that I was going to show her the truth. Not because I wanted to humiliate her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because she needed to learn that the people you underestimate are often the ones holding you up. I picked up my phone and made a call. It was early, but I knew he would answer. Dean William Ashford had been my husband's closest friend for over 30 years. When my husband died, Dean Ashford promised me that if I ever needed anything, he would be there. We had stayed in touch over the years, and he knew about the donation I had made to the university in my husband's name. He knew about the new faculty building. He knew everything. And when I told him what my daughter had said to me, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Let me handle this." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. My daughter did not come home. She stayed with friends, claiming she was busy with finals and graduation preparations. She sent me a few short text messages, mostly about needing money for her cap and gown or asking me to send her some things from her room. She never mentioned the graduation again. She never apologized. She never acknowledged what she had said to me. It was like she had completely erased me from that part of her life, and I was expected to just accept it. But I did not accept it. I spent those 2 weeks working with Dean Ashford on a plan. He was appalled by what my daughter had said to me, and he wanted to make sure that the truth came out in a way that would be respectful but undeniable. We went over every detail. We reviewed the donation records, the building dedication, the scholarship fund I had established in my husband's name. Everything was documented. Everything was real. And everything was about to become very public. The day of the graduation arrived. It was a beautiful spring morning, clear skies and warm sunshine. I woke up early and took my time getting ready. I did not dress like a cleaning lady. I wore a tailored navy blue dress that I had bought years ago but never had the occasion to wear. I did my hair and makeup carefully. I put on the pearl necklace my husband had given me on our 20th wedding anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I felt strong. I felt dignified. I felt ready. I drove to the university and parked in the lot near the main quadrangle where the ceremony was being held. There were hundreds of families already there, setting up chairs, taking pictures, laughing and celebrating. I walked through the crowd alone, and I felt the familiar sting of being invisible. No one looked at me. No one recognized me. I was just another face in the sea of parents. And that was fine. I was not there for them. I was there for my daughter, whether she wanted me there or not. I found a seat toward the back, tucked between two large families who were busy talking amongst themselves. I sat down and waited. The ceremony started with the usual pomp and circumstance, the processional music, the faculty walking in wearing their academic robes, and then the graduates filing in row by row. I scanned the crowd looking for my daughter. When I finally saw her, my heart clenched. She looked beautiful in her cap and gown, smiling and laughing with her friends. She looked so happy, so confident, so completely unaware of what was about to happen. The dean stepped up to the podium and welcomed everyone. He gave the usual speeches about achievement, hard work, and the bright futures ahead of these young graduates. Then he paused and said something that made the entire crowd go silent. He said, "Before we continue with the conferring of degrees, I would like to take a moment to recognize a very special member of our university community. Someone whose generosity and commitment to education has transformed this institution in ways that will benefit students for generations to come." I felt my pulse quicken. This was it. I sat up a little straighter in my seat and kept my eyes on the stage. Dean Ashford continued. "For years ago, we broke ground on the new Benjamin Harmon Faculty Center, a state-of-the-art building that has become the heart of our academic community. That building was made possible by a single anonymous donation of $20 million. Today, I am honored to finally reveal the identity of that donor and to publicly thank her for her incredible generosity." The crowd murmured with curiosity. I could see people looking around, whispering to each other, trying to figure out who it could be. On stage, my daughter was standing with her classmates, looking mildly interested but not particularly concerned. She had no idea. Dean Ashford smiled and said, "That donor is Mrs. Catherine Harmon, the widow of our beloved former professor Dr. Benjamin Harmon, and the mother of one of our graduates here today." The murmuring stopped. The entire quadrangle went silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning, scanning the crowd, trying to find me. On stage, my daughter's face went completely white. Her mouth opened slightly, and she looked around frantically, as if hoping this was some kind of mistake. Dean Ashford continued. "Mrs. Harmon has also established a full scholarship fund in her husband's name, which has already supported 15 students through their undergraduate degrees. She has been a quiet but powerful force for good at this university, and we owe her a tremendous debt of gratitude." Then he looked directly at me and said, "Mrs. Harmon, would you please join me on stage?" For a moment, I did not move. I sat there, frozen, feeling the weight of every single eye in that crowd on me. Then I stood up. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and walked down the aisle toward the stage. The crowd parted for me, and I could hear whispers starting up again, people realizing who I was, people connecting the dots. I kept my head high and my eyes forward. I did not look at my daughter. Not yet. I climbed the steps to the stage, and Dean Ashford met me with a warm handshake and a genuine smile. He handed me the microphone and stepped back. I stood there at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and I finally allowed myself to look at my daughter. She was standing frozen in the middle of her row, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked like horror. Our eyes met, and I saw the exact moment she realized what she had done. I took a breath and began to speak. "Thank you, Dean Ashford, for those kind words." I began, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. I have to admit, I did not expect to be standing here today. In fact, I was told quite clearly by someone very close to me that I should not come to this graduation at all. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I could see confusion on some faces, curiosity on others. My daughter's friends were looking at her, and she was staring at the ground, her face now bright red. I continued, "But I came anyway, because being a mother means showing up, even when you are not wanted. It means sacrificing, even when you are not appreciated. And it means loving your child unconditionally, even when they break your heart." I paused, letting my words hang in the air. My husband, Benjamin, was a professor here for over 20 years. He loved this university. He loved teaching, he loved his students, and he loved the pursuit of knowledge. When he passed away 6 years ago, he left behind more than just memories. He left behind a legacy. He held a patent for a medical device that has since saved countless lives, and when that patent was sold, it generated a significant amount of money. Money that I have quietly used to honor his memory and his values. I looked directly at my daughter now, and she finally looked up at me. There were tears in her eyes, but I could not tell if they were tears of shame or regret or something else entirely. "I could have lived a very comfortable life with that money," I said. "I could have bought a big house, fancy cars, traveled the world. But that is not what Benjamin would have wanted. He believed that education was the greatest gift you could give someone. So I used that money to build the faculty center that bears his name. I used it to create scholarships for students who could not otherwise afford to be here. And I used it to pay for my daughter's education in full, every single semester, without her ever knowing where the money came from." The crowd was completely silent now. I could see parents exchanging glances, students whispering to each other. My daughter was openly crying now, her hands covering her face. I took another breath and continued. "I worked 3 jobs while she was in school. Not because I had to, but because I wanted her to understand the value of hard work. I wanted her to see that nothing in life comes easy, and that success is built on sacrifice and perseverance. I wanted her to grow up humble and grateful. But somewhere along the way, I made a mistake. I let her believe that I was less than I am. I let her believe that I was something to be ashamed of." My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. 3 weeks ago, my daughter told me not to come to her graduation. She told me I would embarrass her. She told me I did not fit in with the other parents. She told me I was just a cleaning lady, and that people would judge her because of me. And in that moment, I realized that I had failed her. Not because I did not give her enough, but because I did not show her the whole truth. I let her believe that worth is measured by appearance, by job titles, by social status. And that is a lesson I need to correct. I looked out at the crowd, at all the parents and students and faculty members listening to every word. Your worth is not determined by what you do for a living. It is not determined by how much money you have, or what kind of car you drive, or what neighborhood you live in. Your worth is determined by your character, by your integrity, by how you treat the people who love you. And if you ever find yourself looking down on someone because of their job or their circumstances, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that the person you are underestimating might be the very person who has been holding you up all along.
The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire quadrangle erupted in applause. People were standing, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. I stood there at the podium, overwhelmed by the response, and I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of everything I had been carrying for so long. Dean Ashford stepped forward and took the microphone from me. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Catherine Harmon," he said, and the applause grew even louder. He shook my hand again and then gestured for me to take a seat in one of the chairs reserved for honored guests on the stage. I walked over and sat down, my legs shaking, my heart pounding, and I finally looked back at my daughter. She was still standing in her row, but now she was looking directly at me. The shock on her face had been replaced by something else. Shame. Regret. Heartbreak. She mouthed the words, "I am sorry," and I could see that she meant it. But I did not respond. Not yet. I just looked at her and then turned my attention back to the ceremony. The rest of the graduation proceeded as planned. Names were called, diplomas were handed out, caps were thrown into the air. But the energy in the crowd had shifted. People kept glancing at me, whispering, pointing. I could hear snatches of conversation around me. "That is her. Can you believe it? $20 million. She worked as a cleaning lady. Her own daughter did not want her here." It was surreal, sitting there in the middle of this massive public event, knowing that I had just exposed my daughter's cruelty and my own sacrifices to hundreds of strangers. When the ceremony finally ended, families flooded onto the field to find their graduates and take pictures. I stayed in my seat on the stage, watching the chaos unfold below me. Dean Ashford came over and sat down next to me. "That took a lot of courage," he said quietly. I nodded but did not say anything. I did not feel courageous. I felt exhausted. I felt heartbroken. I felt vindicated and guilty all at the same time. "She is going to come find you," Dean Ashford said. "And when she does, I hope you will give her a chance to make this right." I looked at him and saw the kindness in his eyes. He had known my husband. He had known our family. He understood what this meant. "I do not know if I can forgive her," I admitted. "Not right now." He nodded. "You do not have to. But eventually, you will have to decide what kind of relationship you want with her moving forward. And that is going to require both of you to be honest with each other." I sat on that stage for another 20 minutes, watching families celebrate, watching graduates hug their parents and pose for pictures. I saw my daughter from a distance, standing with a group of her friends, but she kept looking over at me. She was not celebrating. She was not smiling. She was just standing there, looking lost and small and utterly devastated. Part of me wanted to go to her. Part of me wanted to wrap her in my arms and tell her it was going to be okay. But the other part of me, the part that was still reeling from her words, kept me frozen in my seat. Finally, she broke away from her friends and started walking toward the stage. I watched her approach, and I could see that she had been crying. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked like she had aged 10 years in the span of 2 hours. She climbed the steps slowly, like she was walking to her own execution, and when she reached me, she stopped a few feet away. We stared at each other for a long moment, and I could see every emotion written on her face. Shame, guilt, fear, regret. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am so sorry. I do not even know where to start. I do not know how to make this right. I do not know if I can make this right." I did not say anything. I just looked at her, waiting. She took a shaky breath and continued. "I was horrible to you. I was cruel and selfish and ungrateful. I said things that I can never take back, and I hurt you in ways that I did not even understand until right now. I thought I was embarrassed by you, but the truth is, I was embarrassed by myself. I was so focused on fitting in, on impressing people, on looking like I belonged here that I forgot who I actually am. I forgot where I came from. I forgot everything you sacrificed for me." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she wiped them away with the back of her hand. "I did not know about the money. I did not know about the donation. I did not know about any of it. And I should have known. I should have asked. I should have paid attention. But I did not because I was too busy worrying about what other people thought of me. And now everyone here knows what kind of person I am. They know that I told my own mother not to come to my graduation. They know that I was ashamed of you. And they are right to judge me because I deserve it." She took a step closer, her hands clasped together like she was begging. "I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. I know I do not deserve your love. But I am asking for it anyway. I am asking you to please give me a chance to do better. To be better. To make you proud. Because right now I am not proud of myself at all. I am disgusted by who I have become." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. Then I spoke, and my voice was quiet but firm. You hurt me more than anyone has ever hurt me in my entire life. More than losing your father. More than any hardship I have ever faced. Because you did it on purpose. You looked at me, the person who has loved you and supported you and sacrificed everything for you, and you told me I was not good enough. You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me to stay away from the most important day of your life. Do you have any idea what that feels like? She nodded, sobbing now. I do. Do now. And I will never forgive myself for it. Never. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff from sitting for so long, and I walked over to her. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, "You are going to have to earn back my trust. You are going to have to show me, through your actions, that you understand what you did wrong and that you are committed to being a better person. Words are not enough. Apologies are not enough. I need to see change." She nodded frantically. I will do whatever it takes. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you." I reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "I love you. I've always loved you and I always will. But love does not mean I have to accept being treated poorly. Love does not mean I have to pretend this did not happen. We have a lot of work to do, you and I. And it is going to take time." She threw her arms around me and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I stood there for a moment, stiff and uncertain, and then slowly I wrapped my arms around her too. I let her cry into my shoulder, and I let myself feel the complicated mess of emotions that came with this moment. Relief, sadness, hope, anger, love. All of it swirling together in a tangled knot that would take a long time to unravel.
When she finally pulled away, she looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said, "Can we go home? Together?" I nodded. "Yes. Let us go home." We walked off the stage together, and as we made our way through the crowd, people stopped us. Parents came up to shake my hand, to thank me for my generosity, to tell me how inspiring my speech was. Students approached my daughter, some offering support, others looking at her with judgment and disappointment. She handled it with as much grace as she could muster, apologizing when it was appropriate, accepting the criticism when it was deserved. By the time we reached my car, we were both exhausted. We sat in silence for a few minutes, neither of us knowing what to say. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why did you keep it a secret? Why did you let me think you were struggling?" I took a deep breath and thought carefully about my answer. "Because I wanted you to appreciate what you had. I wanted you to understand that nothing in life is handed to you. I wanted you to work hard and value your education and not take anything for granted. But I realize now that I went too far. I let you believe a lie, and that lie hurt both of us." She nodded slowly. "I understand. And I am sorry I did not see the truth. I am sorry I did not see you." We drove home in silence, the weight of the day settling over us like a heavy blanket. When we pulled into the driveway, she looked at the small, modest house we had lived in for years and said, "This does not feel like home anymore. It feels like a lie." I turned off the car and looked at her. "It is not a lie. This is where we live. This is where we built our life together. The money does not change that. It is just money." She shook her head. "But you could have lived so much better. You could have had so much more. Why did you choose to struggle?" I reached over and took her hand. "Because I did not want the money to define us. I wanted our character to define us. I wanted you to grow up knowing that who you are matters more than what you have. And I still believe that, even after everything that happened today." The days following the graduation were strange and uncomfortable. My daughter moved back home, and we tiptoed around each other like strangers. She was quieter than I had ever seen her, spending most of her time in her room or sitting silently at the kitchen table. She did not go out with her friends. She did not make plans for the summer. She just existed in this liminal space between who she had been and who she was trying to become. I gave her space, but I also made it clear that we needed to talk. Really talk. Not just apologize and move on, but dig into what had happened and why. So one evening, about a week after the graduation, I made dinner and set the table for two. When she came downstairs, she looked surprised. "You cooked?" she asked. I nodded. "Sit down. We are going to eat and we are going to talk." She sat down slowly, and we ate in silence for a few minutes. Then I put down my fork and said, "I need you to help me understand something. When did I become someone you were ashamed of? When did that shift happen?" She looked down at her plate, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I do not know exactly. It was not one moment. It was gradual. I started spending time with people whose parents were wealthy, successful, influential. I saw their houses, their cars, their lifestyles. And then I would come home and see you working all the time, looking tired, wearing the same clothes, driving the same old car. And I started to feel like I did not fit in. I nodded slowly. So you were embarrassed by our life. By me. She shook her head quickly. Not at first. At first, I just wanted to impress them. I wanted them to think I belonged. So I started lying. I told them my mom was a financial consultant. I told them you worked from home. I told them we had money, but you were just really frugal. And the more I lied, the more I believed it myself. I started living in this fantasy where you were someone different, someone more impressive. And then when graduation came, I panicked. I knew they were going to see you, and I knew the truth would come out, and I could not handle that. I felt a surge of sadness and anger all at once. So you decided the solution was to uninvite me, to tell me I was not good enough. She started crying again, and I was getting tired of the tears, but I let her continue. I know how horrible that sounds. I know how horrible I was. And I am so sorry. I wish I could go back and change it. I wish I could take it all back. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. What do you think you should have done instead? She thought for a moment, wiping her eyes. I should have been honest. I should have been proud of you. I should have told them the truth about who you are and what you have done for me. I should have never lied in the first place. I nodded. Yes, you should have. But more than that, you should have recognized that the people you were trying to impress were not worth impressing. If they were going to judge you based on your mother's job, then they were never really your friends. She looked up at me, her eyes red and tired. I know that now. I see it now. But I did not see it then. I was so caught up in wanting to belong that I lost sight of what actually mattered. I reached across the table and took her hand. That is a hard lesson to learn. And it is one that a lot of people never learn at all. But you learned it. And that is what matters now. The question is, what are you going to do with that lesson? She squeezed my hand. I want to make things right. I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to be the kind of person you can be proud of. I gave her a small smile. I have always been proud of you. Even when I was angry, even when I was hurt, I was still proud of you. Because you are my daughter, and I love you. But pride is not the same as approval. I do not approve of the way you have been acting, and I do not approve of the choices you made. But I believe you can do better. I believe you will do better. She nodded, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I will. I promise. I will make you proud. We finished dinner and cleaned up together, and for the first time since the graduation, the silence between us felt less heavy. It was not comfortable yet, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, my daughter started to change. She reached out to some of the people she had lied to and told them the truth. She apologized to her friends for the way she had behaved at graduation. She even wrote a letter to Dean Ashford, thanking him for giving me the opportunity to speak and for holding her accountable. She did not do any of this for show. She did it quietly, privately, because she genuinely wanted to make amends. She also started helping me around the house. She cooked meals, she cleaned, she ran errands. She asked me about my life, about my work, about my husband. She wanted to know everything she had missed, everything she had ignored for so long. And slowly, piece by piece, we started to rebuild the trust that had been broken. One afternoon, we were sitting on the back porch drinking iced tea when she turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated, then said, "What are you going to do with the rest of the money? Are you going to keep working? Are you going to do something different?" I thought about it for a moment. I have not decided yet. I have been so focused on you, on your education, on making sure you were taken care of, that I have not really thought about what I want for myself. She looked at me with a serious expression. "You should think about it. You should do something for yourself. You have spent your entire life taking care of other people. You deserve to live the life you want." I smiled at her. "That is very thoughtful of you. And you are right. Maybe it is time I started thinking about what I want." She nodded. "I think Dad would want that too. I think he would want you to be happy." The mention of her father brought a lump to my throat. He would. He always wanted me to live fully, to take risks, to not be afraid of change. I think I have been playing it safe for too long. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then stop playing it safe. Do something bold. You have the resources. You have the freedom. You have the time. Use it." Her words stayed with me for days. She was right. I had spent so long being cautious, being practical, being focused on everyone else, that I had forgotten what it felt like to dream. To want something just for myself. To imagine a life beyond responsibility and sacrifice. So I started thinking. I started planning. I started imagining what my next chapter could look like. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt excited about the future. About a month after the graduation, I received a phone call from Dean Ashford. He wanted to meet with me to discuss something important. I agreed, and we met at a small cafe near the university campus. He greeted me warmly, and we sat down at a quiet table in the corner. "How are you doing?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. I smiled. "I am doing better. My daughter and I are working through things. It is not easy, but we are making progress." He nodded. "I am glad to hear that. What happened at the graduation was difficult, but I think it was necessary. Sometimes the truth needs to be exposed in order for healing to begin." I agreed. "I think you are right. As painful as it was, I think it was a turning point for both of us." He took a sip of his coffee and then leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Since your speech at the graduation, there has been an outpouring of interest in your story. Parents, students, even faculty members have reached out to me asking if you would be willing to speak again. They want to hear more about your journey, your philosophy on education, your perspective on parenting and sacrifice." I was surprised. "Really? People want to hear from me?" He nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. What you said resonated with so many people. You touched on themes that are universal. The fear of being judged, the pressure to fit in, the misconception that worth is tied to status. People need to hear that message, especially now." I thought about it for a moment. I do not know if I am the right person for that. I am not a public speaker. I am not an expert. He smiled. "You do not need to be. You just need to be honest. That is what made your speech so powerful. It was raw, it was real, and it came from the heart. That is what people connect with." I considered his words. The idea of speaking publicly was terrifying, but it was also intriguing. Maybe this was part of what my daughter had been talking about. Maybe this was an opportunity to do something bold, something meaningful, something just for me. What would this look like? I asked. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "We have had several requests. A few local parenting groups want you to speak at their meetings. A nonprofit organization focused on education reform wants you to be a keynote speaker at their annual conference. And there is even a podcast that focuses on family dynamics, and they want to interview you." I opened the folder and looked through the requests. There were at least a dozen different opportunities, each one more daunting than the last. "I do not know," I said slowly. "This feels overwhelming." He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "You do not have to do all of them. You do not have to do any of them if you do not want to. But I think you should consider it. I think you have something valuable to offer, and I think sharing your story could help a lot of people." I looked up at him and saw the sincerity in his eyes. "Can I think about it?" He nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." I left the cafe with the folder tucked under my arm, my mind racing with possibilities. When I got home, my daughter was in the kitchen making lunch. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. "How was your meeting?" I set the folder down on the counter. "Interesting. Dean Ashford wants me to start speaking publicly about what happened at the graduation. He says people are interested in hearing my story." Her eyes widened. "Are you going to do it?" I shrugged. "I do not know. It is scary, but it is also kind of exciting." She walked over and picked up the folder, flipping through the pages. "Mom, you should do this. You have an important message, and people need to hear it. You could actually make a difference." I looked at her, surprised by her enthusiasm. "You really think so?" She nodded firmly. "I know so. What you said at my graduation changed me. It opened my eyes to things I had never thought about before. If it can do that for me, imagine what it could do for other people." Her words gave me courage. "Okay," I said. "I will think about it seriously. Maybe I will start small with one of the local groups and see how it goes." She grinned. "I think that is a great idea. And if you need help preparing, I am here. I can help you practice, I can give you feedback, whatever you need." I pulled her into a hug. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." She hugged me back tightly. "I am proud of you, Mom. I know I have not said that enough, but I am. I am so proud of who you are." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I chose one of the smaller speaking opportunities, a local parenting group that met once a month at a community center. I spent hours writing and rewriting my speech, trying to find the right balance between honesty and vulnerability without oversharing. My daughter helped me practice, sitting in the living room and giving me feedback on my delivery, my pacing, my tone. She was surprisingly good at it, offering constructive criticism and encouragement in equal measure. The day of the event arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. My hands were shaking, my stomach was in knots, and I seriously considered calling and canceling at least 3 times. But my daughter would not let me back out. She drove me to the community center and walked me inside, holding my hand the entire way. "You are going to be amazing," she whispered. "Just speak from the heart, like you did at graduation." There were about 50 people in the room, mostly mothers, some fathers, all looking at me with curious, expectant faces. I stood at the front of the room with a microphone in my hand, and I took a deep breath. Then I began to speak. I told them my story. I told them about my husband, about the money, about the choices I made. I told them about my daughter's cruelty and my own heartbreak. I told them about the graduation, about the speech, about the aftermath. And I told them what I had learned through it all. "We live in a world that constantly tells us we are not enough," I said. "Not rich enough, not successful enough, not impressive enough." And we internalize that message. We start to believe it. We start to judge ourselves and each other based on superficial things that do not actually matter. But the truth is, your worth is not determined by your job or your bank account or your social status. Your worth is determined by your character, by your integrity, by how you love and support the people in your life. And if we can teach that to our children, if we can model that for them, then we will raise a generation of people who value substance over status. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone joined in. People stood up. They came over to shake my hand. They thanked me for my honesty. Several women had tears in their eyes, and they shared their own stories of feeling judged, feeling inadequate, feeling like they were not enough. It was overwhelming and beautiful and deeply healing. After the event, my daughter and I went out for dinner. We sat across from each other in a booth at a diner, and she looked at me with so much pride and love that I felt my heart swell. "You did it," she said. "You were incredible." I smiled. I was terrified. She laughed. "I know, but you pushed through it. And look at the impact you had. Those people needed to hear what you had to say." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for being there. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for pushing me to do this." She squeezed my hand. "That is what daughters are supposed to do, right? Support their mothers." I laughed. "Ideally, yes." She smiled, and then her expression turned more serious. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I want you to know that I am grateful for the way you handled it. You did not let me off the hook, but you also did not give up on me. And that means everything." Over the next several months, I continued speaking at various events. Each time, I gained a little more confidence, a little more comfort with sharing my story. I spoke at parenting groups, education conferences, and even a few corporate events where they wanted me to talk about leadership and values. The response was always overwhelmingly positive. People connected with my message, and many reached out afterward to share their own stories of struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. My daughter graduated and started applying for jobs. She was careful and intentional about the kind of work she wanted to do, focusing on nonprofit organizations and companies that aligned with her values. She told me she did not want to chase money or prestige anymore. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that made a difference. I was proud of her for that. She had truly learned from what happened, and she was making choices that reflected her growth. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch together, she turned to me and said, "I have been thinking about something." I looked over at her. "What is that?" She hesitated, then said, "I want to write about what happened. About the graduation, about our relationship, about everything we went through. I think it could help other people, especially young adults who are struggling with similar issues." I was surprised. "You want to write about it publicly?" She nodded. "I do, but only if you are okay with it. I would never do it without your permission." I thought about it for a moment. "What would you say?" She took a deep breath. "I would be honest. I would talk about how I was ashamed of you, how I made terrible choices, how I hurt you. But I would also talk about how you responded with grace and strength, how you held me accountable, and how you gave me the chance to grow. I think people need to hear both sides of the story." I felt a mix of emotions. Pride, because she was willing to be vulnerable and honest. Fear, because it meant exposing our private pain to the world. But ultimately, I trusted her. Okay, I said. If you think it will help people, then I support you. She smiled, relief washing over her face. Thank you. I promise I will do it justice. Over the next few weeks, she worked on her essay. She showed me drafts, asked for my feedback, and made revisions based on my input. When it was finally finished, she submitted it to a popular online platform that focused on personal essays and family relationships. A few days later, they accepted it, and it was published. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people read it, shared it, and commented on it. Some praised her for her honesty and vulnerability. Others criticized her for what she had done, calling her spoiled and ungrateful. But most people seemed to appreciate the message of growth and redemption. They saw themselves in her story, either as the child who had made mistakes or as the parent who had been hurt. One comment in particular stood out to me. It was from a woman who said she had recently reconnected with her estranged daughter after years of silence, and reading my daughter's essay gave her hope that healing was possible. I showed the comment to my daughter, and she started crying. "This is why I wrote it," she said. "This is what I wanted. I wanted people to know that it is never too late to make things right." As the essay gained more attention, we started receiving interview requests. News outlets, podcasts, and even a few television shows wanted to talk to us about our story. My daughter asked me if I was comfortable doing interviews, and I told her I was. We had come this far, and if our story could help even one person, it was worth it. We did several interviews together, and each time, I was struck by how much my daughter had grown. She spoke with humility and maturity, owning her mistakes and emphasizing the importance of accountability and growth. She did not make excuses or try to downplay what she had done. She simply told the truth, and people respected her for it. One of the most memorable interviews was with a podcast that focused on family reconciliation. The host asked us a question that caught me off guard. "Mrs. Harmon, do you think you would have forgiven your daughter if she had not apologized? If she had not changed?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I do not know," I said honestly. "I like to think that I would have, because I love her unconditionally. But I also believe that forgiveness requires genuine remorse and a commitment to change. If she had not shown me that she understood what she did wrong and that she was willing to do the work to be better, I do not think our relationship could have been repaired." The host nodded thoughtfully. "So you are saying that love is not enough. There has to be accountability." I nodded. "Exactly. Love is the foundation, but it is not the whole structure. You need trust, respect, communication, and accountability. Without those things, the relationship will crumble, no matter how much love there is." After the interview, my daughter and I sat in the car for a few minutes before driving home. She was quiet, staring out the window. Finally, she said, "Do you really think our relationship would have ended if I had not apologized?" I looked at her. "I think it would have been very different. I think there would have been a permanent distance between us. I would have loved you, but I would not have trusted you. And that is not the kind of relationship I want with my daughter." She nodded slowly. "I am so glad I apologized. I am so glad I did the work. I do not ever want to lose you again." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You will not. As long as you keep being honest and keep working on yourself, we will be okay." A few months later, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a literary agent who had read my daughter's essay and seen some of my speaking engagements. She said she thought our story would make a great book, and she wanted to represent us. My daughter and I talked about it, and we decided to move forward. We spent the next year working on the manuscript, writing and rewriting, sharing our perspectives, and working through the painful parts of our story all over again. The process was difficult but also incredibly healing. It forced us to confront things we had not fully processed, to have conversations we had avoided, and to dig deeper into our emotions and motivations. There were days when we argued, days when we cried, days when we wanted to give up. But we kept going, because we believed the story was worth telling. When the book was finally finished, we submitted it to publishers. Several were interested, and we ultimately signed with a major publishing house. The book was scheduled to be released the following spring, and we were both nervous and excited about what that would mean. In the meantime, life continued. My daughter got a job at a nonprofit that provided education resources to underserved communities. She loved her work and was passionate about making a difference. I continued speaking at events, and I also started volunteering with organizations that supported caregivers and family reconciliation. I felt like I had found a new purpose, a new way to honor my husband's legacy, while also creating something meaningful for myself. One evening, as my daughter and I were cooking dinner together, she turned to me and said, "Do you ever regret the way things happened? Do you ever wish you had just stayed quiet at the graduation?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "I do not regret it. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done, but it was also one of the most important. It forced both of us to face the truth, and it set us on a path toward healing. If I had stayed quiet, we would have just kept pretending everything was fine, and that would have destroyed us eventually." She nodded. "I agree. As painful as it was, I am grateful it happened. It changed me. It made me a better person." I smiled at her. "It changed me too. It reminded me that I am strong, that I have value, and that I do not have to accept being treated poorly, even by the people I love most." The months leading up to the book release were a blur of activity. We did pre-publication interviews, planned a book tour, and worked with the publisher on marketing strategies. My daughter took time off from her job to help with the promotional efforts, and we traveled together to several cities, speaking at bookstores, libraries, and community centers. Everywhere we went, people were eager to hear our story. They asked thoughtful questions, shared their own experiences, and expressed gratitude for our honesty. It was humbling and overwhelming and deeply rewarding. I had spent so much of my life being invisible, being overlooked, and now I was standing in front of hundreds of people, being seen and heard and valued. It was a strange and beautiful feeling. One of the most meaningful events was a book reading we did at the university where my daughter had graduated. Dean Ashford introduced us, and the auditorium was packed with students, faculty, and community members. When I looked out at the crowd, I saw so many familiar faces. People who had been at the graduation. People who had heard my speech. People who had been part of our journey. I spoke first, reading a passage from the book about the moment I decided to show up at the graduation despite being uninvited. Then my daughter read a passage about her realization of what she had done and how it felt to stand on that stage, watching me speak, knowing she had hurt me so deeply. There was not a dry eye in the room. When we finished, we opened the floor for questions. One young woman raised her hand and asked, "What advice would you give to someone who has hurt a parent or family member and does not know how to make it right?" My daughter thought for a moment, then said, "Start with a genuine apology. Not an excuse, not a justification, just a simple, honest acknowledgement of what you did wrong and how it affected them. And then follow it up with action. Show them through your behavior that you have changed. Words are important, but actions are what rebuild trust." Another person asked me, "How did you find the strength to forgive her?" I smiled. I do not think forgiveness is about strength. I think it is about love and a willingness to believe that people can change. I saw that my daughter was genuinely sorry, and I saw that she was willing to do the work to be better. That gave me hope, and hope is what made forgiveness possible. After the event, we stayed for over an hour, signing books and talking to people. So many young adults came up to my daughter and thanked her for her honesty, saying they had made similar mistakes and her story gave them courage to try to repair their relationships. So many parents came up to me and thanked me for setting an example of how to hold your children accountable while still loving them. When we finally got back to our hotel room that night, we were both exhausted but happy. My daughter flopped onto the bed and said, "I cannot believe how many people showed up. I cannot believe how much this book is resonating with people." I sat down next to her and said, "I think people are hungry for stories about real families, real struggles, real growth. We live in a world where everyone pretends everything is perfect, and it is refreshing to see someone be honest about their mistakes." She nodded. "I am glad we did this. I am glad we told our story." I put my arm around her. "Me too." The book became a bestseller. We were both shocked and humbled by the response. It stayed on the bestseller list for several weeks, and we continued to receive messages from readers all over the world, sharing how the book had impacted them. One letter in particular moved me to tears. It was from a mother in her 70s who had been estranged from her son for over a decade. She said that reading our book gave her the courage to reach out to him, and they were now slowly rebuilding their relationship. She thanked us for showing her that it was never too late to try. I showed the letter to my daughter, and she cried too. "This is everything," she said. "This is why we went through all of that pain, so that other people do not have to." I nodded. Exactly. As the book tour continued, we started receiving invitations to speak at larger venues. corporate conferences, national education summits, even a TED Talk opportunity. My daughter encouraged me to do the TED Talk, saying it would give our message an even bigger platform. I was terrified, but I agreed. Preparing for the TED Talk was one of the most challenging things I had ever done. The format was strict, the time limit was tight, and the stakes felt incredibly high. But I worked with a coach, practiced relentlessly, and finally felt ready. The day of the talk, I stood backstage, my heart pounding, my palms sweating, and I thought about how far I had come. A few years ago, I was scrubbing floors and being told I was an embarrassment. Now, I was about to speak on one of the most prestigious stages in the world. When I walked out onto that stage and saw the red dot of the camera, I took a deep breath and began. I am 64 years old, and 2 years ago, my daughter told me not to come to her college graduation because I would embarrass her. Today, I want to talk about what happened next and what it taught me about worth, dignity, and the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it hurts. I told the story. I told it with honesty and vulnerability and strength. I talked about the pain, the betrayal, the decision to show up anyway. I talked about the speech I gave at the graduation, the public reckoning, the slow process of rebuilding trust. And I ended with a message about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, not even the people you love most, make you feel less than. The audience gave me a standing ovation. I stood on that stage, tears streaming down my face, and I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I had never felt before. My daughter was sitting in the front row, clapping and crying and beaming with pride. When I walked off stage, she rushed over and hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "You did it," she whispered. "You were perfect." I held her close and said, "We did it. This is our story and we told it together." The TED Talk went viral. Millions of people watched it, shared it, and commented on it. I received messages from people all over the world, thanking me for my courage and my message. It was surreal and overwhelming and deeply humbling. But through it all, the most important thing to me was my relationship with my daughter. We had been through hell and back, and we had come out stronger on the other side. We had learned how to communicate, how to hold each other accountable, how to forgive, and how to move forward. We were not perfect, but we were real. And that was enough. One night, as we were sitting together on the porch, she turned to me and said, "I have been thinking about something." I looked at her. "What is that?" She smiled. "I want to start a nonprofit. An organization that helps young adults and their parents navigate difficult conversations and repair broken relationships. I want to take what we learned and use it to help other families." I felt a surge of pride and excitement. "That is a beautiful idea. How can I help?" She reached over and took my hand. "I was hoping you would be my co-founder. We could do this together." I squeezed her hand and smiled. "I would love that." And so we began a new chapter. Together. Starting the nonprofit was more challenging than either of us anticipated. We had passion and a compelling story, but we had no experience running an organization. We spent months researching, attending workshops, consulting with experts, and learning everything we could about nonprofit management, fundraising, and program development. We named the organization Bridge Builders because we wanted it to reflect the work of repairing and rebuilding relationships. Our mission was to provide resources, workshops, and counseling services to families who were struggling with communication, estrangement, or conflict. We wanted to create a safe space where parents and children could come together, be honest about their pain, and work toward healing. We started small, offering free workshops at community centers and libraries. My daughter led the sessions with young adults, talking about accountability, humility, and the importance of apologizing when you have done wrong. I led sessions with parents, talking about setting boundaries, modeling values, and balancing unconditional love with the need for accountability. The response was incredible. People were hungry for these conversations, and they appreciated the fact that we were speaking from experience, not theory. One of the first families we worked with was a mother and her adult son who had not spoken in over 3 years. The son had made some choices that his mother disapproved of, and instead of trying to understand his perspective, she had cut him off completely. He was hurt and angry, and she was stubborn and self-righteous. It was a mess. We spent several sessions with them, facilitating conversations, helping them express their feelings without attacking each other, and guiding them toward understanding and empathy. It was slow and difficult work, but eventually they started to soften. They started to listen. They started to see each other as human beings instead of adversaries. By the end of our time together, They were not fully reconciled, but they were talking again. They were trying. And that was progress. We worked with dozens of families over the next year, each one with their own unique challenges and pain points. Some were dealing with addiction, some with financial stress, some with differing values and beliefs. But the common thread in all of them was a breakdown in communication and a lack of understanding. Our job was to help them rebuild that foundation, one conversation at a time. The work was exhausting but deeply fulfilling. There were days when I went home emotionally drained, feeling like I had absorbed everyone else's pain. But there were also days when I witnessed breakthroughs, moments of genuine connection and healing, and those moments made everything worth it. My daughter thrived in this work. She was compassionate, insightful, and incredibly skilled at connecting with young adults who were struggling. She had a way of making them feel seen and heard without judgment, and they trusted her because she had been where they were. She understood the shame, the regret, the fear of not being able to make things right. And she used that understanding to help them find their way back. As Bridge Builders grew, we started receiving funding from donors who believed in our mission. We were able to hire a small staff, rent office space, and expand our programs. We launched an online platform where families could access resources, join virtual support groups, and connect with trained counselors. We also started a scholarship program to ensure that families who could not afford our services could still access them. One of the most rewarding aspects of the organization was the community that formed around it. Parents and young adults who had gone through our program stayed connected, supporting each other, sharing their stories, and offering encouragement. It became a network of people who understood what it felt like to have a broken relationship and who were committed to doing the work to repair it. About 18 months after we launched Bridge Builders, we held our first annual fundraising gala. It was a formal event with dinner, speakers, and a silent auction. My daughter and I both spoke, sharing the story of how the organization came to be and the impact it was having on families. We also invited some of the families we had worked with to share their testimonies, and there was not a dry eye in the room. At the end of the evening, we announced that we had raised over $200,000, which would allow us to expand our programs and reach even more families. The room erupted in applause, and my daughter and I stood on stage, holding hands, overwhelmed with gratitude and pride. After the gala, we went back to my house and sat on the porch with cups of tea. We were both exhausted, but we were also buzzing with excitement. "I cannot believe what we have built," my daughter said, staring out at the night sky. "A year and a half ago, this was just an idea. Now it is a real organization helping real people." I smiled. "It is because we did not give up. We could have let what happened at your graduation destroy us, but instead, we used it as a catalyst for change. We turned our pain into purpose." She looked at me with so much love and admiration. "You turned your pain into purpose. You are the one who showed me how to do that. You are the one who taught me that even in the darkest moments, there is an opportunity for growth." I reached over and took her hand. We taught each other. This is our journey, and we are walking it together. She squeezed my hand. "I am so grateful for you, Mom. I am so grateful for your forgiveness, your patience, and your willingness to give me a second chance. I do not know where I would be without you." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "And I am grateful for you. You made a mistake, but you owned it. You did the work. You became the person I always knew you could be. That takes courage, and I am so proud of you." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. Then she said, "I have been thinking about Dad a lot lately. I think he would be really proud of what we are doing." I nodded, feeling the familiar ache of missing him. "I think so too. He always believed in the power of education and the importance of relationships. Bridge Builders honors both of those values." She smiled. "I wish he could see this. I wish he could see us." I looked up at the stars. "I think he can. And I think he is smiling." Over the next year, Bridge Builders continued to grow. We expanded into 3 more cities, trained additional counselors, and partnered with schools and universities to offer our programs to students and their families. We also launched a podcast where we interviewed families who had successfully repaired their relationships, as well as experts in family therapy, communication, and conflict resolution. The podcast became popular, and it brought even more attention to our work. We started receiving speaking invitations from all over the country, and my daughter and I traveled frequently to share our message and promote the organization. It was a demanding schedule, but we loved it. We loved the work, we loved the impact, and we loved doing it together. One afternoon, as we were preparing for a speaking engagement, my daughter said, "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not said those things to you? If the graduation had just been a normal day?" I thought about it for a moment. I think about it sometimes. I think I would have continued living the same quiet life, working my jobs, keeping my head down, never really stepping into my power. What happened forced me to stand up for myself, to recognize my own worth, and to use my voice. In a strange way, it was a gift. She looked at me with surprise. "A gift? Really?" I nodded. "A painful gift, but a gift nonetheless. It woke me up. It pushed me out of my comfort zone. It gave me a purpose that I did not know I needed. So yes, in hindsight, I am grateful for it." She smiled. "I am grateful too. Not for the pain I caused you, but for the growth that came from it. For both of us." As bridge builders continued to thrive, my daughter and I found ourselves becoming advocates not just for family reconciliation, but for broader issues related to mental health, education, and social equity. We were invited to speak at conferences on topics ranging from parenting in the modern age to the importance of financial literacy and transparency within families. One particular conference stood out. It was a national summit on family dynamics, and we were asked to participate in a panel discussion with psychologists, social workers, and family therapists. The topic was accountability and forgiveness, finding the balance. It was a subject we knew intimately, and we were both nervous and excited to share our perspective alongside experts in the field. During the panel, one of the therapists asked me a question that I had not anticipated. "Mrs. Harmon, you have spoken a lot about forgiveness and rebuilding trust. But what about families where the person who caused harm is not willing to change? What advice would you give to parents who are still waiting for their children to apologize, or to children who are waiting for their parents to acknowledge the hurt they caused?" I took a deep breath and thought carefully before responding. That is one of the hardest situations to navigate because you cannot control another person's willingness to change. You can only control your own actions and responses. If you are waiting for an apology that may never come, you have to decide whether you are going to let that lack of closure define your life. Forgiveness does not always require the other person to participate. Sometimes forgiveness is something you do for yourself so that you can move forward and find peace, even if the relationship never gets repaired. The therapist nodded thoughtfully. "So you are saying that forgiveness is not contingent on reconciliation?" I nodded. "Exactly. Forgiveness is about releasing the hold that the hurt has on you. Reconciliation is about rebuilding the relationship. Those are two separate things, and sometimes you can have one without the other." My daughter added, "And I think it is also important to acknowledge that some relationships are not meant to be repaired. Some people are toxic, and staying in relationship with them is harmful. In those cases, the healthiest choice is to walk away and focus on your own healing." The panel discussion went on for another hour, and the conversation was rich and nuanced. Afterward, several people came up to us to thank us for our honesty and to share their own stories. It was clear that the issues we were talking about resonated deeply with people, and it reinforced our commitment to the work we were doing. A few months later, we were approached by a production company that wanted to create a documentary about our story and the work of bridge builders. They said they wanted to follow us for 6 months, filming our workshops, our speaking engagements, and our interactions with the families we were helping. They also wanted to interview us extensively about our personal journey. My daughter and I talked it over and decided to move forward with the project. We believed that a documentary could reach an even wider audience and bring more attention to the importance of family reconciliation and accountability. The process of being filmed was strange and uncomfortable at first, but eventually, we got used to the cameras and just focused on the work. One of the most powerful moments captured in the documentary was a workshop we did with a family who had been estranged for over 5 years. The father had kicked his daughter out of the house when she was 18 because she refused to follow his strict rules. She had struggled for years, dealing with homelessness, addiction, and trauma. Now she was clean, employed, and ready to try to rebuild the relationship. But her father was still angry and unwilling to acknowledge his role in what had happened. We spent an entire day with them, facilitating difficult conversations, pushing them to be honest about their feelings, and helping them see each other's perspectives. At one point, my daughter looked at the father and said, "You say you love your daughter, but love without accountability is not love. It is control, and control is what drove her away in the first place." If you want her back in your life, you have to be willing to admit that you made mistakes too. The father was defensive at first, but eventually he broke down. He admitted that he had been too hard on her, that he had let his pride and anger destroy their relationship, and that he was terrified of losing her forever. It was a raw, emotional moment, and it marked the beginning of their healing process. The documentary premiered at a major film festival and received rave reviews. Critics praised it for its honesty, its emotional depth, and its hopeful message about the possibility of redemption and repair. It was eventually picked up by a streaming platform and reached millions of viewers around the world. The response was overwhelming. We received thousands of messages from people who said the documentary had inspired them to reach out to estranged family members, to have difficult conversations, and to seek help for their own broken relationships. It was humbling and deeply moving to see the ripple effect of our story. One message in particular stood out. It was from a woman who said she had been estranged from her mother for 15 years. After watching the documentary, she reached out, and they met for coffee. She said it was awkward and painful, but it was also the first step toward healing. She thanked us for giving her the courage to try. I read the message out loud to my daughter, and we both cried. "This is why we do this," she said. "This is why we put ourselves out there, even when it is hard. Because it makes a difference." As the years went on, my daughter and I continued to grow both personally and professionally. She eventually became the executive director of Bridge Builders, overseeing all operations and strategic planning. I took on the role of board chair and continued to speak and advocate for the organization. We also continued to work on our own relationship, making sure we were practicing what we preached. We had regular check-ins where we talked about how we were feeling, what we needed from each other, and how we could continue to support each other. We were not perfect, but we were committed. And that made all the difference. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch like we had done so many times before, my daughter turned to me and said, "Do you remember the day of my graduation? Do you remember standing on that stage?" I nodded. "I remember every second of it." She smiled. "I remember being so angry at you in that moment. I remember thinking you were trying to humiliate me. But now, looking back, I realize you were trying to save me. You were trying to show me who I was becoming, and you were giving me a chance to change." I reached over and took her hand. "I was not trying to humiliate you. I was trying to hold up a mirror. And I am so glad you looked into it and decided to change what you saw." She squeezed my hand. "I am glad too, because if I had not, I would have lost you. And losing you would have been the biggest mistake of my life." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the horizon. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. We had been through so much, my daughter and I: pain, betrayal, anger, forgiveness, growth, and healing. But we had come out on the other side stronger, closer, and more committed to each other than ever before. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. Several years after the documentary premiered, Bridge Builders had grown into a nationally recognized organization with chapters in over 20 cities. We had helped thousands of families navigate difficult conversations and repair broken relationships. We had trained hundreds of counselors and facilitators. We had created a robust online platform with resources, forums, and virtual workshops. And we had built a community of people who were committed to doing the hard work of healing. My daughter and I were both in our 60s now, and while the work was still demanding, we had learned to pace ourselves and delegate more. We had an incredible team of dedicated staff and volunteers who shared our passion and our vision. Bridge Builders was no longer just our project, it was a movement. One afternoon, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as a producer for a major morning talk show. She said they wanted to do a special segment on family reconciliation and wanted to feature my daughter and me, along with some of the families we had worked with. She said it would air nationally and reach millions of viewers. I agreed, and a few weeks later, we were sitting in a television studio in New York City, preparing to share our story once again. The segment was beautifully done. They showed clips from the documentary, interviewed us about the work of Bridge Builders, and brought out two families we had helped who shared their powerful stories of estrangement and reconciliation. The host was moved to tears, and by the end of the segment, the entire studio audience was on their feet, applauding. After the show aired, we received an outpouring of support and interest. Our website crashed because so many people were trying to access it at once. We had to hire additional staff just to handle the volume of inquiries and requests for services. It was overwhelming, but it was also a testament to how much people needed what we were offering. One of the most rewarding outcomes of the television appearance was a call we received from a major philanthropist who wanted to make a significant donation to bridge builders. He had watched the segment with his own estranged son, and it had prompted them to have a conversation that eventually led to reconciliation. He was so grateful that he wanted to give back. His donation allowed us to expand our programs even further, offering more scholarships, hiring more counselors, and reaching even more families. As bridge builders continued to grow, my daughter and I started thinking about the future. We wanted to make sure the organization would continue long after we were gone. So we began developing a succession plan and training the next generation of leaders. We also started working on a curriculum that could be used in schools, teaching young people about healthy communication, conflict resolution, and the importance of accountability and forgiveness. One day, my daughter came to me with an idea. "Mom, I have been thinking, what if we created a retreat center? A place where families could come for a week or a weekend and work intensively on their relationships in a supportive, peaceful environment. We could offer workshops, counseling, meditation, and time for families to just be together without the distractions of everyday life." I love the idea. "That sounds incredible. Where would we do it?" She smiled. "I have been looking at properties. There is a beautiful piece of land upstate, surrounded by forests and lakes. It is peaceful and private, and it would be perfect for what we are envisioning." We went to look at the property together, and it was even more beautiful than she had described. I could see it so clearly in my mind. Families walking the trails, sitting by the lake, having difficult but necessary conversations, and finding healing in the quiet beauty of nature. We decided to move forward with the purchase, and over the next year, we worked with architects and builders to create the retreat center. We named it the Harmon Center for Family Healing, in honor of my late husband. It felt right to have his name attached to something that embodied his values of education, growth, and connection. The center opened 2 years later, and it quickly became one of the most sought-after programs in the country. Families came from all over to spend time there, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. One family who came to the retreat center had been estranged for over a decade. The mother and daughter had not spoken since the daughter came out as gay, and the mother, due to her religious beliefs, had rejected her. It was a heartbreaking situation, and both of them were carrying so much pain. We worked with them intensively over the course of a week, and by the end, they were not fully reconciled, but they had made significant progress. They were talking, they were listening, and they were beginning to see each other as human beings again. The daughter wrote to us a few months later to say that she and her mother were continuing to work on their relationship, and that the retreat had been the turning point. She said she finally felt like her mother was trying to understand her, and that gave her hope. It was letters like that one that reminded us why we did this work, even when it was hard. As I approached my 70s, I started thinking about my own legacy. I had spent the last several years focused on bridge builders and on helping other families heal. But I also wanted to make sure I was living fully, embracing joy, and making the most of the time I had left. I started traveling more, spending time with friends, and pursuing hobbies I had neglected for years. I took painting classes, learned to garden, and even went on a solo trip to Europe, something I had always wanted to do, but never made time for. My daughter encouraged me every step of the way. "You deserve to enjoy your life, Mom. You have spent so much time taking care of everyone else. Now it is your turn." Her words meant the world to me, and I took them to heart. I started saying yes to things that scared me, to adventures that felt indulgent, to experiences that brought me joy. And I found that the more I invested in my own happiness, the more I had to give to others. One evening, as my daughter and I were sitting together at the retreat center, watching the sun set over the lake, she turned to me and said, "Do you have any regrets?" I thought about it for a long moment. I regret that I did not stand up for myself sooner in some areas of my life. I regret that I let fear hold me back from pursuing certain dreams. But when it comes to you, when it comes to our relationship, I do not have any regrets. Everything we went through, as painful as it was, brought us here. And I would not change that for anything. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I do not have any regrets either. Well, maybe one. I regret what I said to you before my graduation. But I do not regret what came after. I do not regret the journey we have been on together. I kissed the top of her head. Neither do I. The final chapter of our story is not really an ending, because the work continues. Bridge Builders is still growing, still helping families, still making a difference. My daughter and I are still speaking, still advocating, still showing up for the people who need us. And we are still learning, still growing, still working on our own relationship every single day. But if I had to summarize what I have learned from this journey, it would be this. Your worth is not determined by other people's opinions of you. Your worth is inherent. It is not something you earn or lose based on your job, your income, or your social status. It is something you carry with you, always. And when someone tries to diminish you, when someone tries to make you feel less than, you have the right to stand up and say, "No, I am worth more than this." I also learned that love is not passive. Love requires action. It requires showing up, even when it is hard. It requires setting boundaries, holding people accountable, and refusing to accept mistreatment, even from the people you love most. Love is not about keeping the peace at all costs. It is about creating a relationship built on respect, honesty, and mutual support. And finally, I learned that it is never too late to change. It is never too late to apologize, to make amends, to do better. My daughter made a terrible mistake, but she did not let that mistake define her. She owned it, she learned from it, and she became a better person because of it. And that is the message I want to leave with anyone who hears our story. No matter what you have done, no matter how badly you have messed up, you have the power to change. You have the power to grow. You have the power to make things right. A few months ago, my daughter and I were invited to speak at a university commencement ceremony. It was not the same university where she had graduated, but it felt symbolic nonetheless. We stood on stage together, looking out at hundreds of graduates and their families, and we told our story one more time. I talked about the pain of being uninvited to my daughter's graduation, and the courage it took to show up anyway. I talked about the power of speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes. I talked about the importance of knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. And I talked about the beauty of second chances, of forgiveness, and of the healing that is possible when both people are willing to do the work. My daughter talked about the shame and regret she carried after what she said to me, and the long, difficult process of earning back my trust. She talked about the importance of accountability, of owning your mistakes, and of being willing to change. She talked about the privilege of being given a second chance, and the responsibility that comes with it. And she talked about the incredible gift of having a mother who loved her enough to hold her accountable while still giving her grace. When we finished, the audience stood and applauded. Graduates threw their caps in the air. Parents hugged their children. And my daughter and I stood there together, hand in hand, knowing that we had come full circle. We had started this journey in pain and betrayal, but we had ended it in love and redemption. After the ceremony, a young woman approached us. She had tears in her eyes, and she said, "I have not spoken to my mother in 3 years. After hearing your story, I am going to call her tonight. Thank you for giving me hope." My daughter hugged her and said, "It is not going to be easy, but it is worth it. I promise." As we walked back to our car, I thought about that young woman and all the other people we had reached over the years. I thought about the families we had helped, the lives we had touched, the healing we had facilitated. And I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had brought us here. Gratitude for the strength I had found within myself. Gratitude for my daughter's willingness to change. And gratitude for the opportunity to turn our private heartbreak into a public mission. That night, my daughter and I went out to dinner to celebrate. We chose a quiet restaurant with a view of the water, and we ordered a bottle of wine to share. As we sat there, toasting to the day and to each other, she said, "I have something for you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "It is not much, but I wanted to give you something to mark this moment." I opened the box and found a delicate silver bracelet with 2 charms, a bridge and a heart. I looked at her, tears filling my eyes. "It is perfect," I whispered. She smiled. "The bridge represents what we built together, and the heart represents the love that made it possible." I put the bracelet on my wrist, and I knew I would never take it off. It was a symbol of everything we had been through, everything we had overcome, and everything we had built together. It was a reminder that even the most broken relationships can be repaired if both people are willing to do the work. As we finished our meal and prepared to leave, my daughter raised her glass one more time. "To second chances," she said. I raised my glass and clinked it against hers. "To second chances," I echoed. "And to the courage it takes to give them and to earn them." We walked out of the restaurant together, arm in arm, and I felt a deep sense of peace. This was not the life I had imagined for myself all those years ago when I was scrubbing floors and working 3 jobs. But it was a life I was proud of. It was a life filled with purpose, meaning, and love. It was a life that honored my husband's legacy and my own strength. And it was a life I was still actively creating, one day at a time. As we drove home that night, the city lights twinkling around us, my daughter reached over and squeezed my hand. "I love you, Mom," she said. "I know," I replied. "And I love you too. Always." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles we faced, we would face them together. Because we had already survived the worst, and we had come out stronger on the other side. We had learned that love is not weakness, that forgiveness is not surrender, and that standing up for yourself is not selfish. We had learned that family is not just about blood. It is about commitment, about showing up, about doing the hard work of staying connected even when it hurts. And most importantly, we had learned that it is never too late. It is never too late to speak your truth. It is never too late to change. It is never too late to heal. It is never too late to build a bridge back to the people you love. And it is never, ever too late to reclaim your worth and step into the life you deserve. That is our story. A story of pain and betrayal, but also of courage and redemption. A story of a mother who refused to be diminished and a daughter who found the strength to change. A story that we hope will inspire others to have the difficult conversations, to do the hard work, and to believe in the power of second chances. Because in the end, that is what life is all about: learning, growing, forgiving, and loving with everything you have. And if we can do it, so can you.